Welcome from the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter study group for April 2023. This is the 13th of April. This is our 73rd class. We are going to work on the BABOK chapter 10 techniques. We're going to go over interviews and metrics and KPIs. And let me tell you a little bit about us. Our mission here at the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. We've given you several ways to be able to reach us. This is our Thursday night study group. You've reached us between 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern. You can see past meeting recordings here at this address, and Cliff will drop this in the chat if you would like to access it. We've recorded most of our last 72 classes, and you can watch them at your leisure. We have people from around the world that contact me and say, we're watching it in my work study group, and we're following along. We're a week behind you or 2 weeks behind you. So they're still continuing to get benefit from our efforts. So let's keep going. We also have an IIBA site, 2 meetup sites, Zoom, Facebook, and 2 LinkedIn sites. So if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you want to know how to do something, if you want guidance or mentorship, that's what we're here for. You can reach out to us. We are sponsored by Watermark Learning. We have a discount code from Watermark for 20% off of any of their products. They don't only have business analyst products, they have other products as well. They do have business analyst products for the different certification tests or business analysis through the IIBA. They have classes, they've got videos, they've got flashcards, and then they've got the practice study questions that we've used for many of our classes so far. We are a volunteer-led organization. You'll see Cliff here. He's our president. He's also our marketing genius. You see him here in his X-Wing fighter. He is here to keep us all on track and keep us going. Then Lori, Caitlin, and Priscilla are also on our board. My name is Thea Soren. I am the Vice President of Career and Professional Development for the Tampa Bay, Florida chapter, and it is my job to help you learn what you need to learn as a business analyst. As you know, being a business analyst means that there's lots more than just business analysis that you can learn, and I've been doing it for 30 years. So with my experience and the interests of the other folks in the group, maybe you can figure it out and learn what you need to learn. We need new board members. If you're interested in being a board member, contributing to our efforts, if it's long-term, short-term, or just for a project, if you would like to have a board membership on your resume, contact us and we can see about putting you to work, either learning a new skill or using strengths and experience that you already have. We have 2 people joining us here. You can see here is Bob here. He has earned his CBAP certification as well as a variety of other things he's earned. He also has a website that has a lot of really great information on it, not just about business analysis. And you can reach him at bob@rpchurchill.com if you have questions or suggestions. Yulia has also joined us. She was a member of our student in our class for a long time. And in September of this last year, she earned her certification as a CBAP. So she has agreed to be here periodically. She's also pursuing her master's degree. And so she is not always able to be here, but we're very glad whenever she is. As I said, Yulia was a student, became one of our leaders. Tish was also a student. She earned her ECBA last year. And I talked to Bonnie Bell not long ago. She also was a student and earned her CBAP certification. So we do have people that they're students and they go on to get their certifications, and they contact me and they say, you know, if it wasn't for y'all, your encouragement, your understanding, your explanations, I couldn't have done this. And so I don't always think that you needed us, but it's nice to hear that we were beneficial to you. Tonight, as I said, we are going to go over 2 techniques, interviews and metrics and KPIs, and Bobby's going to present those to us. We have a volunteer list of techniques that if you're interested in presenting a technique, we need you to sign up on the volunteer list and just tell us when you would like to do it and approximately how long you want to present that technique. The only things we need from you is that commitment. We want you to go over what's in the BABOK specifically so that people that are taking the test can benefit from the information from the BABOK. And if you have any real life examples of, I've used this technique in my job and here's how I use it, and these are tips and tricks that will benefit you in your pursuit of being a better business analyst, we'd like for you to bring that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob. Bob, I'll give you the screen. And I've stopped sharing.
Okay, can you see the screen for interviews?
Yes, you can.
All right, let me see if I can make that a little bigger. There we go. And can you see metrics and KPIs?
Yes, we can.
And also this.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Everything is working. So after last week's discussion, I realized that I have not necessarily been thinking of these techniques and the use thereof fully enough. And I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time, and I have biases, right? And it's always great to revisit the material over and over. Thanks to you guys, I get to do that and hear other perspectives, and that's always important. That's why I talk about doing business analysis in a interactive, cooperative, iterative manner to get all those perspectives. And when Jim launched into talking about, I can't remember which one it was, either backlog or prioritization, maybe it was Racy actually. Yeah, it was Racy, I think. I realized he was talking about it from the point of view of the engagement. And I thought it was only from the point of view of the solution. And that totally fried my brain. So it told me I have not thought about it enough. So what I'd like us to do to start is I want to keep this in your mind. So the practice of business analysis is about figuring out what's going on, coming up with a solution to build something new or change something for the better, or to even change the entire working environment so the organization or the group can do better. And also the process of actually doing the work of business analysis. So you're doing the methodology in the end goal. It's also sometimes broken down as the product in the process. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about interviews and also metrics and KPIs. And I love it if you would opine at the end of both of those, whether you think that they are each more germane to the solution or the engagement. I'll write that down. At the end, we'll take a few minutes to review what we've done in the other techniques we've covered so far, and then we will make that a regular part of our talks going forward.
Bob, before you start that, let's talk about what you mean by the solution or the engagement.
Well, the engagement is the process of doing the work. It's applying what you learn in the knowledge areas for how to, so somewhere in here in this presentation, I have my framework steps, and only 6 of these are really germane. And here the knowledge areas in chapter 3 through 9 of the BABOK, right? And they tell the story of how you move from the beginning of an effort to the end. And I tell the story of a different way to think about them. You use all the skills and techniques. It just makes more sense to me, and uses language that makes sense to me, given my experience building simulations and other systems. Now, as you notice, the strong X's go from the upper left to the lower right, more or less, right? So the BABOK is telling you a story of how you work through a problem the same way I am. It's just doing it a different way. So the process of applying all these steps and techniques, that's the engagement. That's the work of being a business analyst. However, there are tons of kinds of solutions you can come up with. And here are many, some of the approaches you can use to generate solutions. And I can talk about these at some future time. I've been doing a webinar on some or all of these before too long for another group of people, so I can point you to that. So
Okay.
basically, I always think about the work we do in terms of improving processes. So what you do in improving processes, whether you're automating and rearranging and building, that work the system, the business or enterprise or organization has when you're done, that's the solution. Either the one you created or the improvement you did to it. So that's the solution. The work we do is the engagement.
Okay, I understand much better now. Thank you.
And with that in mind, let me talk about metrics and KPIs first. So I realized when doing this, I needed and again, thank you for being here and making me think about this. I need to improve some of the graphics, but what metrics and KPIs are about is telling you in a minimum number of values how your operation is doing. And it is usually involved with strategy or some kind of goal. And it's kind of a shorthand summary value that includes a lot of other information. It can be either for a small part of the operation or governing a larger part of the process. They can be expressed in many ways. For example, it can be a point value. For example, when I was in the paper industry, these systems we installed, we were doing guarantees of 95% uptime, and that was increasing from 90. So that was an important metric that was easy to express. If you know anything about manufacturing and particularly Six Sigma, what you're trying to do is reduce variation. And if you reduce variation within tolerances, you reduce things that don't meet the target. So you can express KPIs as a range, plus or minus some percentage or some tolerance of a central value. You can also do a probability. So for border crossings, the way you size them is you fix it so 85 the people that go through within 15 minutes 85% of the time. Why do we express it that way? So sometimes, especially on the southern border, there are big holidays and there's a huge amount of vacation travel across the border in both directions sometimes. And if you build the entire facility to handle that load, you'd be spending a ton of money and a ton of salary having all that stuff sit there for most of the year. And it actually makes the most sense to pay a little overtime at that time and just make people wait a couple weekends a year. So that's the economically most efficient. And the point is that metrics and KPIs can be expressed very differently depending on what they're trying to capture or reflect. So there are a lot of values. If we look at some kind of process, there are values that describe the processes that govern the decisions in the process, that talk about and quantify and characterize arrivals, processing rates, and so on. And in reality, most of those items are not good candidates for KPIs. They are what they are. What you want for KPIs is things that describe the overall operation of a running system or some important part of it, like the percentage that go through without needing rework, or the there are a bunch of things, the number that go through, well, meeting some criteria or a percentage. So I need a slightly better graphic here in the next one. So hopefully this gives you a flavor of what I'm trying to drive at and what the BABOK is. So they're likely to be derived from the operation of a running system. And data, which I have talked about in a separate webinar, really gets folded into a system in a lot of places and is spat out of a system in a lot of places. So when you do discovery and data collection, that really characterizes the system in the early phases in conceptual modeling and requirements and design. And then the variables that govern the decisions, your business rules, your pass, no pass, your operating parameters, they kind of get folded in during the implementation. And then the values that come out of the running system or the output, they're generated data. So if you remember writing user stories, they tend to make them want to be standalone, small, actionable, understandable, and a few things. So they say the same thing about metrics and KPIs. They should be clear and they should be relevant and they should be economical in terms of how much work they are to get. If it takes a huge amount of people, what the information will be not worth the trouble it takes. Adequate, so metrics may not capture everything if they're defined properly. You want to make sure they capture enough information. Quantifiable, meaning they have to be expressed as values you can verify and validate, and trustworthy and credible. Everyone has to agree that they're accurate and come from trusted sources. So I actually worked on a program where the metric or calculations and simulations were meant to figure out and improve. And it was called readiness. And it had to do with fleets of aircraft. So these aircraft required a whole host of maintenance procedures and inspections and whatever, and they were also flying quite a lot. And anytime any one of those aircraft was waiting for maintenance or waiting for a part or waiting for an inspection, it was classed as not ready. And they did this in 6-minute increments, so they could express everything in terms of hours and decibels. So 12 minutes would be hour and 0.2 and so on. So it was simple. And they added up all the times the aircraft were ready to go and not ready. And they came up with a overall aggregate readiness score. And it was surprisingly low, only about 30%. Now, these things got up in the air and they flew quite often, but you have to understand what the score actually means. For any metric or KPI you come up with. And you also have to be sure a KPI captures what you really want. So a KPI will govern something you're trying to accomplish. There's a famous old Soviet cartoon about making nails. And the managers in the Soviet Union used to specify that you would make a ton of different kinds of nails. And the joke in this cartoon is this guy made one nail. It was very heavy. It's not usable for very much, but he made his quota, right? And as you know, back in those days, if you don't make your quota, bad things happen. So here is a case where the way they express the metric did not incentivize the correct behavior. And there's another law on this called Goodhart's law. And there's a link to the Wikipedia article also that says when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So do you want to measure in terms of the weight of nails made or the number of nails made? Well, it depends on the kind of nails you need. Another story from the Soviet Union back in the day was told by a guy named Tom DiLorenzo, who's a very sharp economist I learned from often. And he talked about how the skewed incentives the Soviet managers put together or established meant that they'd be able to frame and put up the side coverings on all these buildings, but they never had enough roofing nails. And so they built these frames and put them up all over the place. And then they can never put roofs on them because they didn't have enough of the right nails, and stuff would just rot. And that's meaning that you don't have the price system operating, and that becomes kind of your measure. Roofing nails are harder to make, and so you pay more for them, but that gives the producers of various kinds the incentive to do things that are more difficult. For example, if you want to be work in a convenience store and it's relatively clean, that's great. You get, $18 an hour or something like that. Or you can be a garbage person who gets up at the crack of dawn, goes around and empties people's trash cans, and they probably get $30 an hour. It's way harder work, but the incentives are pay for people to do that work. So make sure you understand what you're actually trying to measure and incentivize. I tell another story here that a manager I became aware of established a win rate for their sales teams as 80% as the target. But is that really the correct thing? Maybe you want to get the most sales. And if you target 80%, then maybe you won't talk to people where there's less chance of making a sale. And there's a sweet spot between the amount of effort you spend and the amount of sales you make, and also the amount of profit realized per sale. So you want to make sure that you set the right metrics, include all the right information, don't take shortcuts, and really think about what you want to do. And I always love this picture. What it talks about was different people see things from different angles, and it's the same stuff, but they'll see aspects of it you won't. So definitely review and communicate about all these things. Any questions on that? Okay, let me ask the next question, and that is, do you think this is more germane toward the solution or the engagement, the running process the customer has, or whether it's an internal or external customer, or the process of doing the work. Anyone have any opinions?
I think that's almost a trick question, Bob, because we would use it as business analysts by figuring out what the problems are and measuring the solution and figuring out how to make improvements, but the solution also uses KPIs. What do you think?
I think also that, I saw this originally in the light of KPIs being mainly a solution, a solution focus, in that you can't know if your solution has succeeded if you don't have KPIs to begin with. But you could also apply KPIs to the process. So you might be measuring, say, the velocity of your project and your deliverables, and say that you have to meet this quota of production in the process in order to go live on time. So there might be multiple ways you could apply KPIs, but I could imagine that it's very difficult to say that you've succeeded if your solution has no KPIs. You could succeed perhaps with your process, kind of not really paying too much attention to KPIs, although you might be late with delivering it. But and you might be over budget. But if your solution doesn't have KPIs, how do you know you succeeded? And I find that these are really hard to gather from our business stakeholders. They often say, well, just make it happen. As long as it works, we're good. And I have to kind of say, well, what if, and kind of help them define what a KPI is, because they don't necessarily have those stored away in a box to pull out for us. Other people have, is that what other people think?
Don't everyone speak up at once.
I have found that using KPIs to analyze performance of processes whenever they have no idea what the KPI should be. It's like we don't use KPIs, but there are KPIs. Once you figure out what a process is doing and how long it takes certain people, you can put a price tag on each unit costs this much. Overall people, process, time, materials, and then you can say, we can reduce it by reducing this one thing, or we can improve it by fixing this one thing. But until you have that, they don't have any motivation to make the changes, or they don't have as much motivation to make the changes. It also helps in budgeting your project by saying we can save. I one time saved a company $150,000 a year, and they had no idea that they had problems. But whenever I got it all laid out, the processes defined, the KPIs figured out, and then calculated the results of them not making improvements because it was going to give them regulatory issues and they were breaking laws. It gave them a lot of motivation to make those changes and improve the lives of their employees considerably.
All right. My first pass when I thought about this was that it is primarily to do with the solution. That was my theory. I think you can make a case that metrics can certainly govern the working of a team or a business analysis process, and I think that's secondary. So we've learned two things. I have. One is that it's very possible that many of these techniques will be applicable to both, but one much more than the other. And I want to change the way I talk about this to reflect that. So I'm going to write down on my little idiot sheet, you can't see that this is probably is greater than engagement. And if you have different theories on this, by all means, let me know at some point. All right, let's talk about interviews. One thing I will say about interviews is I perform them all over the place in systems, all over the world to learn about what's going on, find out what special things are happening, even when I understood the general process. And I've interviewed people in every phase of the project. And I think interviews, the way the BABOK talks about it is they mostly occur near the beginning of their process. They occur when you're doing the conceptual modeling to find out what's going on now. You're learning from managers and SMEs about the current state, and information is flowing from the interviewee to the interviewer. And since we're all BAs, that means we're learning. And the same thing is true in the requirements phase, right? We're interviewing people to find out what they need, different stakeholders, different parts of the solution team, and so on. So again, we are learning from our interviewees, whoever they happen to be. And we can also learn the initial intended use and the whole raison d'etre of the project or the effort from the managers and sponsors and so on. So in the first half of a project, I will submit that information is primarily flowing from the interviewees to the business analyst. Now, an interesting part of what goes on, and probably not the way the BABOK really talks about it, is in the back half, what you tend to do is you propose designs and you propose and develop solutions and you run tests and you give those work products to your interlocutors in the organization. So you're giving them information and they're kind of interviewing you. Do you like that? So you're really soliciting their feedback. So in a way, the information is still coming from them. That's important, but the primary flow of information is reversed. That's not something important for the exam. I just think it's interesting. So let's begin at the beginning. An interview is a process of conducting a conversation with someone to determine what they do, what they need, how they're reacting to something you've given them. Now, the general term elicitation is often used, but that's a larger concept. All right. Again, I talk about how it works in each phase. I'm already going over that. Excuse me. I have to get up to speed here. Yeah, so interviews are actually part of it. It's not you do an interview one time and walk away and never talk to that person again. I mean, that maybe that'll happen sometimes, but it really should be part of a either more or less formal conversation where there is the opportunity for review and clarification and iteration. In the end, what you want to do is be right and not distort other people's views, unlike the news media, but that's a separate conversation. All right. One thing, interviews involve communication, and to that end, I think we should revisit this communication model. I probably shared this with some of you before. It's a model I learned in NCO school in the Army, the lowest level leadership school they offer. And you have the speaker and the listener, and there are all these spaces here. Let me see if I can make this bigger one more time. So it's the speaker thinks he or she said something, and then there's what that person actually said, the information that was actually transmitted, what the listener actually heard, and what the listener thinks was heard. And so what you need to be mindful of this is you need to have empathy, you need to have good understanding and patience and time and mutual respect. You definitely want to make sure everybody feels heard, and you always want to follow up with a question like, did I miss anything? Is there anything else you want to tell me to make sure that the communication is complete? When you're dealing with the electronic communication, the same model applies, but there are a few extra steps, retries, queuing, that kind of thing. And there's also a signal to noise ratio, and there's a concept of entropy that comes in information theory. So be aware about that. And interviews are different than focus groups or workshops. They're more one-on-one or involve very small groups, and you have a chance for much greater, more personalized interaction and feedback. All right. You also need to be mindful of things that happen before, during, and after the interview. The first thing I'll point out is that interviews can be structured or unstructured. So they can be formally set up, or they can happen when and wherever. You can have a formal list of questions which you may or may not have submitted ahead of time. You want the interviewee to be comfortable and have access to information if necessary. Interviews come in many forms. I've done process walkthroughs and tours where people have shown me and a whole data collection team what's going on in an area. And that's a combination of several different techniques, of which interviewing is one, certainly. When you're done, well, before the interview begins, you'll want to let the interviewer know whether you're recording it or how you're taking notes, whether they will have a chance to provide feedback and so on, and ask you questions. And also you should give them your contact information so they can reach you for clarification or even complaints. So interviews have advantages and disadvantages. So you can get more details from individual experts than you can from a group, but the major downside is they can be difficult to arrange and they can be time consuming, and you don't always get as many of them as you might like. So that's most of what I have to say on that. As always, I recommend that you read what the BABOK has to say. They will sometimes add a few extra points. What's important to be to pass the exam is to know what the BABOK says. Again, I'm always interested in having you be great analysts, and I'm marginally less concerned with whether you pass the exam, but I feel I need to share that whenever I do this. So this article and all its links are on my website, as in the blog section, as always. And do you have any questions about this? And also, do you have opinions as to whether this is primarily part of the solution or the engagement?
I'll speak up. I think it's engagement. What do you think, Jim?
I'm not sure why it, yes, it's definitely part of the engagement. It absolutely, because but it leads to a solution. But if you don't do the interviews during the engagement, then you can't get to a solution.
Right.
But you also, once you have solution, you can do interview and find out how solution works.
Yeah.
And
that becomes part of your QA process.
Well, and the information you're getting in the interviews directly informs the solution. So the output of your interviews informs the solution, but you're doing the interviews as part of your process. You're also doing your interviews as part of the process. Like you said, Julia, if you're talking about strategy analysis and you're looking at the implemented solution, you're interviewing people about their pain points and possibly understanding whether you're meeting your KPIs as part of those interviews. So that in and of itself is a process, but it's looking again at the solution, right? So Bob, I tend to agree with Thea that this is interesting. This is a solution, okay?
My first pass was to think about the solution, and maybe that's a brainstorm. I'm going to write down engagement more than the solution. And I think that what I was trying to get at, and I need to look at this blog post here.
Actually, I have a question. I'm just curious, what you experience. How do you take notes during interview? I mean, I'm asking you all guys. How do you usually take notes?
I do two things. I take notes in front of them where they can see it. So number one, they can see that I'm paying attention and I'm responding to what they're actually saying. Number two is whenever I take those notes, I very often am doing process mapping and let them see what I'm doing. Number three is I ask if I can record the conversation, because you use a totally different part of your brain to record things as you do to interact with people. And if you're trying to switch back and forth, you're going to miss something. So if you can record it, it's a lot more beneficial for you. And then send your notes to that person at the end. Have them validate it.
I'll tell you what I've done, and it's was easier given the hardware at the time. When I was doing a lot of discovery and data collection interviews, I had a Sony Clea handheld device. It was Palm OS before these things got really good. And it had a mechanical switch on the side that would break. So today's phones are much better. But what I would do is ask questions, get the answer, summarize a recording to myself, which I would then transcribe after the interview, and send the notes back. So that's another way of doing it. That's kind of a hybrid. Often I'll get drawings and, draw on the drawings or have them walk me through things on that. I think I like the fact that you're saying engagement here. I don't know what I was thinking about solution. I think that, well, there's two things. One is, this is where you get the information to understand and build the solution. But here's one that'll really throw you. I spent a lot of time working on security systems and inspection systems like border crossings, airport checkpoints, and so on. And when you design those processes, interviews and the structure of those interviews is a part of that. So interviews can be embedded in processes. You might interview customers. Certainly the sales process for something like a car is a kind of interaction. It's all part of the process. So I'm gonna write down that engagement more than solution, which is a change to my initial understanding. I thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. And I'll try to do one every week. Recently we talked about rating matrix. Oh, we decided that was both. Right, that's what started this whole conversation. And how about stakeholder list mapping personas? Anyone have a theory on that, engagement or solution?
I think that's engagement.
I'd say it's engagement as well.
All right, how about backlog management?
That's how we run the project. That's engagement.
All
All of
right,
that stuff, everything we do points to the solution, but that is actually a tool we use during the engagement.
rock on. And the last one, which would get us totally caught up, is prioritization.
I would say that's engagement as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd say that's both.
Okay.
Solutions definitely have, but let me see what I said in my chart here. So prioritization, I said engagement. How about that? Maybe that's right. Backlog management, engagement for sure.
Uh-huh. Cliff noted something interesting in the chat that Microsoft has Teams products that will transcribe your meetings if the person agrees to that they be transcribed. Please do be aware of the laws in the state that you're recording from and to be sure that you are legally able to do that. In some states, only one person in the conversation has to be aware of the transcription, but to gather trust, to garner trust with your people, it's better to be upfront and respect their wishes about their words and their everything.
Are
Yeah,
you saying there's different laws between a transcription and a recording? I didn't know that.
kind of the
No.
same scene, right? Because transcription is just
They're
going to spit
not,
out you.
legally, they are not.
I'm not saying that there's different between transcription and recording. I'm saying there's different laws between states. So it
Oh,
can't be you're in Florida, I'm in Missouri. If I do it from here, I may have to follow different rules than you do it from there, or if we're both in the same state. So to keep yourself out of trouble, be aware of the laws, but also be aware that, hey, I'd like to really record this so that I can focus on your answers instead of trying to take notes. Would that be okay with you? And then once you hit record, say, thank you for letting me record this, and then continue. That way you have that on the recording. We just have a few minutes left. I want to go just over a few last things. Whenever you're doing an interview, please be aware of the language of the person that you're interviewing. And I'm not talking about their first language. I'm talking about, are they an introvert or the extrovert? Are they deeply into the technology that they're focused on? Do you need to be able to speak their language? If they're, let's say, a heating and air conditioning person, you need to speak HVAC fluently if you want to get the details from them. You will have words that they say that you don't know what they mean, and say, hold on, I'm sorry, what does that word mean? I just want to make a note of it so that I can understand it. So create a glossary as you go along. And as always, at the end of the interview, say, I'm going to send all this to you after I get it cleaned up. I want to be sure that I fully understood everything you had to say, because what you said to me was important, and give them an opportunity to review it, but require them to confirm it, because that's your validation that you got it right. Two other things, whenever you're speaking to them, a phrase that I found is very, very effective is, I want to match your urgency. No matter what their objections are, if you can work that in, I want to match your urgency. If they're concerned about something, if they have a timeline, if they have something that's a priority, use that word and that phrase, and it helps them understand that you're in that with them. You're not trying to pull something over on them. Next week, we're going to be going over estimation. Jim is going to be presenting estimation. And do we have a second thing next week, Rob? Sorry, Bob.
I will have glossary focus groups and workshops ready. We'll do what we have time for.
Okay.
Jim and anybody else comes first. And
Okay.
what are you doing again, Jim?
I think estimation is on 427. So I think
I'm sorry.
But I did want to run it by some of you, like Thea and Bob and Cliff, just to make sure you keep me honest on what I'm going to present. And if you have ideas, maybe I can include them. Let me know if you want me to post the PowerPoint out on the site someplace, or send it to you and then get some feedback before the 27th. That would be awesome.
Well, here's what I'd like to propose. Jim, you have experience in this. You have experience in some ways, probably more than some of us. For us to give you our opinion is kind of faulty. What we need from you is to give us your experience. So
Okay.
we're not going to review your thing beforehand.
Okay.
We want to see it. We'll have questions and comments. We'll be absolutely honest, but we're not going to, we want you to succeed. And we appreciate you bringing it to us. We don't need to review it and
Cool.
give you the green light.
I've got a draft. I'll gussy it up and I should have it ready by next week, maybe the week after, but
Okay.
yeah, we'll work it in.
Okay, so that's the 27th. So Bob, we're gonna do yours next week. And what is that?
Focus groups and workshops as one talk, they're separate and different techniques, but related, and also glossary.
Okay, glossary is really important. Those of you who don't use a glossary on in your projects, I encourage you to really pay attention to this. It can be the difference between success and failure. Okay, guys, we will see you next week. Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
attention.
Thea,
Yes.
before you go, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
The spreadsheet for the techniques, did you want to let them know that that's out in the recordings if they want to look and grab something, or have you already done that?
You know what? I didn't tell them where it's at. You want to tell them where it's at, Cliff?
I mean, it's right with the recordings. So you'll be able to see the spreadsheet. Unfortunately, I can't give everybody edit rights. So if you can let Thea know what you want to take, and she'll be able to edit it and
Yeah, I
take
need
care
to
of
know.
that for you.
I need to know who wants to take what you want to take. I want to know when you want to do it and approximately how long you think it will take. I would ask that you spend at least 10 minutes on any of the topics because they deserve that much. I want you to do two things. I want you to focus on what the BABOK says, give us that information because that's what will be tested over. And then if you have any additional experience with it or a example of how to use it, show us that as well. We are not going to be overly critical. We want you to succeed. And we really are excited that you are willing to bring this to us. So send it to me, communicate with me through LinkedIn, please. You can see my name there on the screen and it's not spelled easily. So pay attention to how it's spelled and I'll be responsive through LinkedIn. Anything else, guys?
The only thing I'll say is the same thing I said last week. My name is on that list for quite a few topics. If you want to do one of those because it's a particular area of interest for you or experience them, by all means claim it. This is your class.
There are several techniques in there that are not deeply technical business analysis techniques. They are just things that we do as humans. If you're not experienced as a business analyst, but you want to try this, take one of those. We've had several people in the past that have taken one of those and they've rocked it. Just learning how to speak in front of people is a skill that you have to practice. Some people are born with the gift of gab, and then others of us have to conquer fears and angst. This is a great way amongst people that care about you, that accept you, that want to hear what you have to say. And it's not like we're in the room with you even. So volunteer for one and you'll rock it. Okay, guys, I'll see you next week. Have a great week and enjoy the springtime. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.